aside from all the heavy breathing, that was us, the place was silent, but it was gorgeous. From the little blurbs that I had read, the next place to arrive at would be Lumo Dutru, a female Naga cemetery. It was dedicated to Tamdrin, the horse-headed deity. Now, this was what's called a traditional Tibetan sky burial place, where bodies are cut up with sharp tools and fed to the vultures. However, the spot was not soon forthcoming. It just seemed to be forever somewhere in the future, in the distance. We climbed and climbed and climbed. Now, somewhere along in here, we met an old man who had like skin like leather. He was coming down, and he motioned us to come close to him. He took from his pack what looked like a piece of quartz crystal, and he began to hack away at it, eventually handing each of us a tiny piece. It turned out it was rock candy, sugar. We thanked him and moved on, and these small pieces of sugar, something I would never eat normally, turned out to be just the thing, and that little bit of energy meant a lot at that point. So anyway, on we went, and after a very long time, our guide pointed through the mist to a distant stupa, which is a Tibetan monument, high up on the mountain. All I could do was groan. This was the place that we should have reached an hour ago, and itself was just a stepping stone on our journey. So, panting and struggling and sitting down often, we gradually moved on. One of the strangest experiences in this kind of climbing is that sooner or later, you actually do reach these far away, just barely glimpsed places. But it just takes time and suffering. We reached the sky burial place, and sure enough, there were human bones and meat-cutting tools scattered around. Like I remember seeing a wrist of bones, all, in a hand lying under a small bush. And there were clothes everywhere. This is something I didn't know. Apparently, it's the custom when someone dies and they're brought to be fed to the vultures, to scatter the clothes of the deceased nearby. Anyway, the place looked like a Goodwill store after a hurricane, and this stupa was just a way station, just a place on our journey. So we circumambulated it, which is traditional, which is called Kora, and we looked to see if there are any more human remains, were fascinating, and then we gradually marched on. By this time, we literally were walking in the clouds. And after a very long time, the trail began to even out, and there were some sections that almost resembled walking, but not quite, and certainly not for long. Margaret offered to help me carry my pack, and we took turns for a while. We began to have dim glimpses of a monastery across a canyon that, believe it or not, our guide told us that's where we had to get to. It seemed so far away from where we were. And by this time, we were very high up, and the yak herder that we had come across began to find some of his yaks. But they were always on the other side of the canyon from him. And he had a sling, and he was adept at like winging rocks across the canyon, so they would hit ping, ping near their yaks. But the yaks didn't pay too much attention, and meanwhile I couldn't even look around me half the time. That's how hard I was breathing. It was like I had tunnel vision, looking just at the ground in front of my eyes. It was all that I could do to look just in front of me and then put one foot in front of the other. And our path by this time had turned almost into what could only be called a rock staircase. This was just before we reached Shel Drak Monastery, which is dedicated to the famous Nyingma treasure finder or tertan called Orgyen Lingpa. After what seemed forever, we scrambled up and into the wide courtyard in front of the monastery, which the monastery had like a single large door, really large, but it was closed. And it too looked for all the world like it had been abandoned. So what to do, I asked our guide. And he said, try opening the large door. And sure enough, it swung open, and we pushed inside and just kind of collapsed on a porch in a sunny inner courtyard where there were people there, and we had lunch and butter tea. It was only hard-boiled eggs, some bread, and a few cookies. But it tasted like ambrosia after the long hike. We were just so tired. And as it turned out, this gompa, this monastery, marked the end of the easy part of the hike. From here on, it was almost straight up, like rock stairs or boulder stairs. But the good news is that in this last stretch, it takes less usually than an hour of climbing to reach the cave itself. Starting out, we crossed a small natural rock bridge above like a rushing stream. In Tibet, all the waters, because of the mountains and they're high, rush. And they don't just rush like we see a little stream flowing. They're deep, like culverts or aqueducts. The water that we were crossing over is called Terchu, or rediscovered water. It was a spring that's sacred to Guru Rinpoche. And from here on, the way was indeed steep, with sheer drops on one side of us and a flat rock face on the other. So we kind of clung along. I have vertigo, so I was literally clinging to the rock face on the other side.